To reap a return in 10 years, plant trees. To reap a return in 100 years, cultivate the people. That was said by the famous Vietnamese political leader and revolutionary Ho Chi Minh. Before I go any further, I'd like to thank my uncle-in-law, Rabbi Yechiel Goldreich, for the inspirational idea behind my Dvar Torah this week. It seems that coronavirus leads every news story these days, as of course it should. Hence the reason for me addressing you all by web video this week. People all over the world and here at home are canceling their vacations, avoiding public areas, and stocking up on supplies in case of a quarantine. This year, a third of all Toronto synagogues postponed or entirely canceled their Purim celebrations amid fears contributing to the spread of the disease. My own professional convention was to take place this summer in Italy, and this week we all received the official email that it had been canceled. And I'm rather surprised it took them this long to do it. Meanwhile, the world economy is slowing, stocks are falling, and the price of a small bottle of Purell is up to about $110 on Amazon. It's legitimately frightening. But amidst the fear, we're also noticing an odd difference in the way we are responding to this pandemic when we compare our current situation to outbreaks in the past. Many of us remember the H1N1 outbreak in 2009, also referred to as swine flu. According to the CDC, there were 18,500 laboratory-confirmed deaths from the disease, with unconfirmed deaths estimated between 150,000 and 575,000 around the world. By comparison, the current estimated number of deaths from the coronavirus worldwide is hovering only at about 3,000. It's important to note, of course, that we are still in the midst of this crisis, and experts assure us that that number will grow significantly. But even so, I was shocked to learn about the wide gap between these numbers, particularly given the ferocity of the worldwide response to the coronavirus outbreak compared to the 2009 swine flu. The economic behavior is also vastly different when compared to 2009. Today, the Dow and the S&P 500 both reflect enormous drops in the stock market as people cancel vacations, factories temporarily close, and productivity generally slows. By contrast, back in 2009, global economies were in the process of bouncing back after the 2008 crash, and continued to improve despite the swine flu outbreak, measuring only a small dip in the market fluctuation. The narrative of our Parsha this week, Ki Tisa, focuses on the famous story of the sin of the golden calf. However, for those paying attention, the very beginning of this Parsha is eerily poignant for us today, as it describes the Israelites responding to an outbreak of a disease within the camp. God commands the construction of a copper washing station, initiating a policy that all those approaching the tent of meeting or using the altar would be required to wash first. In the book of Exodus, chapter 30, verses 20 and 21, God says, "When they enter the tent of meeting, they shall wash with water so that they will not die. Or when they approach the altar to serve, to make a fire offering, rise up in smoke to the Lord, they shall wash their hands and feet so that they will not die." Most interestingly, though, is God's commandment to Moses to perform a census of the Israelite nation, which includes a rather peculiar qualifier. Only a few verses earlier in the Torah, verse 12, God says, "When you take a census of the children of Israel according to their numbers, let each one give to the Lord an atonement for his soul when they are counted. Then there will be no plague among them when they are counted." It seems that God is suggesting that there is some connection between the census and the plague that is gripping the Israelite camp. There's a Jewish superstition to avoid counting people, as it invites the ayin hara, the evil eye. This can be particularly annoying it can be a particularly annoying superstition to observe, because we Jews are constantly counting ourselves when we make sure that we have enough people in shul for a minyan. My personal custom, as it is for many, is not to count with numbers, but to use the words of a blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam hamotzi lechem min ha'aretz. A standard 10-word blessing, 1 word per person. If I finish the blessing and there are still uncounted people, presto, we have a minyan. Rashi's commentary on the verse agrees when he says, "For the evil eye has power over numbered things, and pestilence comes upon them." In 1919, the Spanish flu circumnavigated the globe, killing an estimated 17 million to as many as 50 million people. The economy was entirely unaffected, and this occurred for one very critical reason. World governments deliberately withheld information pertaining to the outbreak over concerns for the post-war effort. Amazingly, that's not at all a conspiracy theory. That's historical fact. Without public service announcements and education about hygiene, without any concerns about canceling public gatherings, the Spanish flu was communicated to roughly 27% of the population of planet Earth. But rather than experience a dramatic economic bust, the West soared obliviously into the roaring 20s. When a human being is reduced to a mere statistic, humanity is devalued, particularly when dealing with large scales. The ancient Israelites understood this as a fundamental rule of life, and therefore, rather than submit themselves as a nameless number for the census, each person instead donated a half shekel to the community chest. And in this way, the total number of Israelites could be known without actually enumerating a single individual. It seems that a dramatic dip in the economy, in fact, reflects an historic peak for humanity. The more we are aware, the more we are educated, the more we are able to contain a pandemic such as the coronavirus. While our markets may be causing us additional grief, it means that our global resources are instead being directed towards making us healthy. Similarly, the money collected from the Israelite census was not channeled exclusively for sacrifices or the glory of the tabernacle, but rather it was earmarked for the building of the washing station. The economy will no doubt bounce back, but in the meantime, we are investing in humanity. It's easy to get wrapped up in the fear as we continue to watch the news. It's frightening when synagogues and schools close and social gatherings get postponed or canceled altogether. But let's also remember that the reason we're doing all these things, the reason we're hurting in a lot of different ways, is because we all believe that humanity will ultimately prevail. All we have to do is be safe and be smart, and remember that despite social distancing, we're all in it together, and we'll get through it together. Shabbat Shalom.